Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, Alhamdulillah, fine. Nice to see you.
Same here.
Yeah,
So,
first glimpse of you. So having butterflies in your stomach?
obviously, this is my first class ever. It's going to be a separate kind of experience.
Yeah, nothing to worry. You will do good. Okay.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
By the way, what's your topic? PhD topic?
My topic is subaltern perspectives, as you can view on your screens. Subaltern perspectives in Mahasweta, Devi's Draupadi and breast keeper. But I will talk about the
Just a minute. Someone told me that I have misspelled on the poster. It is not.
spelling Draupadi. Draupadi.
But I thought that in Bengali it is a Draupadi.
No, it's Draupadi.
Draupadi.
R has to be there, Draupadi, right?
Okay, you should have told me. Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
didn't notice earlier.
Okay.
Sir, I
Not
think
an
it is Dobdi Majan.
The tribal name is Draupadi, but the title is Draupadi.
Yes, madam.
Are you sharing your screen?
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen. Any problem?
Nothing. Yeah, shall we begin? Okay. Okay. So, good morning, all. Thank you for joining us today. And especially thanks to Jemima Nasrin, the resource person of today's lecture. In fact, initially she had some anxiety, but I know that she can do well, and she is pursuing her PhD from Kolkata University, Calcutta. So now I request my guest faculty, teaching assistant, Reshma Banu, to introduce today's guest to the audience. Reshma, over to you. Hello, Reshma, are you there? Hello. 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 Yeah, Reshma, are you there? Maybe she's having some issues.
Maybe some technical issue.
Shit, yeah.
Is everything okay, sir?
Yeah, it's okay, but I think Reshma madam is not responding.
Sir, your audio is mute now.
Yeah, nevertheless, I will take the honor of introducing today's resource person. She is currently enrolled as a PhD student in the Department of English at the University of Kolkata or Calcutta. She completed her master's from the University of Burdwan. Am I right? Yeah.
Burdwan.
Yeah, she qualified NET in 2018 and she has presented papers in national and international seminars. Her areas of interest include South Asian history, cultural studies, folk literature, queer theory, etc. She can be reached at jnasreen 000@gmail.com. So now over to you, Jamima. I extend a warm welcome to you on the behalf of my chairman, Professor Vijay Nagarno, and then my PG students, my PhD scholars, and my colleagues. Welcome, and over to you. So now I open this virtual classroom to you. Yeah, please take over. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. This is Jemima Nasreen, PhD scholar, University of Calcutta. Firstly, I would like to thank Dr. Faz Ahmed Ilkal for giving me this opportunity to engage one class for the PG students and research scholars of Rani Chennamma University. Well, this is my very first class, so I'm very excited as well as nervous. So let's begin. Okay. So as you can see, the topic of my lecture is Subaltern perspectives in Mahasweta Devi's Draupadi and Presskeeper, right? But I have some parts of the lecture. I have divided it into three parts. In the first part, we will discuss about the concept of subaltern. In the second part, we will look into the subaltern studies group. And then in the third part, we will discuss about the subaltern voices from Mahasweta Devi's Draupadi and Presskeeper, right? Okay. So in the first part, we will discuss about concept of subaltern. Now, in this part, we will try to understand the concept of subaltern in its historical development. Although the term has diverse meanings in different disciplines of social sciences, starting from psychology to anthropology, though it became an operative research concept through the works of an Italian Marxist thinker named Antonio Gramsci. You can view that gentleman on your screen. I have introduced a brief bio about him, which I will read out now. Antonio Gramsci was an Italian journalist and activist who is known and celebrated for highlighting and developing the roles of culture and education within Marx's theory of economy, politics, and class. He wrote on political theory, sociology, and linguistics. He attempted to break from the economic determinism of traditional Marxist thought and so is considered a key neo-Marxist. All right, we have to understand what was his concept of subaltern. Okay, so Gramsci used the word subaltern in his article Notes on Italian History, which was later published as part of his most extensively acknowledged book, Prison Notebooks, written between 1929 and 1935. Well, Gramsci was writing the book while he was in prison. So the book is aptly called Prison Notebooks, right? So many people believe that he used the word as a coded word. Instead of using any word like proletariat or giving it any class designation, he used the word subaltern as a coded word so that it passes through the prison censorship and gets published, right? So many people believe that. Next, we will look into his definition of subaltern. Okay, subaltern classes by definition are not unified and cannot unite until they are able to become a state. Their history therefore is intertwined with that of civil society and thereby with history of states and group of states. Okay, so the very fact that the subaltern class is a viable class is so what gives it importance that they are kept divided, right, by the dominant people, by the dominant history. They are the people who are voiceless, who are silenced, who cannot be heard, right? They are outside the hegemonic power, meaning, see, when we consider Gramsci's theory of hegemony, the people who are inside the hegemony must have the power or regime to choose, right? But this subaltern class, it has to be outside that hegemonic power. All right. So these were the people who were voteless, who could not be heard, whose histories are silenced and erased rather. They are called the subaltern classes, and their history is necessarily intertwined with the history of the civil society. It means it's there within the dominant history, but that is silenced or erased. All right. Next, Gramsci also used the concept for studying colonial societies to understand the groups under cultural hegemony that were manipulated by colonial powers to ensure their local dominance. So Gramsci now used the concept of subaltern in post-colonial theme also, right? So he basically suggested that the colonial power was trying to manipulate some people of the subaltern class to ensure their dominance in that local area. Meaning they were trying to produce some elite, subaltern elites. That will be more clear in the next point. The main idea of this communist Italian intellectual was simple. Colonial domination always produces local subaltern elites that are solely elites in the colonial locus but subaltern outside it. Right. So that elite class subaltern, they will be elites in that particular subaltern area. But when they come out of that subaltern area, they are subaltern. They are not elite anywhere. Right. So the colonial powers try to create this in order to ensure their dominance in that particular local area. Right. Again, subaltern classes may include peasants, workers, and other groups denied access to hegemonic power. So anyone who is denied access to hegemonic power can be called subaltern class. All right. Next, say this is, though it's not important in for our class, but still the 6-point plan to study subaltern classes. We will go through fast here. Their objective formation, their active and passive affiliation to the dominant political formations, the birth of new parties and dominant groups, the formations that the subaltern groups produce to press their claims, new formations within the old framework that assert the autonomy of the subaltern classes, other points referring to trade union and political parties. All right, so these were the 6-point plan that Gramsci gave in his book Prison Notebooks to study the subaltern classes. Okay, next we will move on to the next part of our lecture, which is subaltern studies group. Okay, so if you see the larger history of colonialism, there is always official history written by the Europeans. So, the first impulse in post-colonial struggle is to retrieve your own history, right? So, within the context of India, what Ranajit Guho and other subalternists, we will know about them later in this class. So, what they were trying to argue that after independence also, the historiography, Indian historiography is basically bourgeois historiography, right? Mainstream historiography tells the stories of the elite class or bourgeois class. It still doesn't account for the histories of the silent people, the history of the voteless people who might be outside of the caste, right? So the entire project of subaltern studies is then the retrieval of the silenced history and recording of them. Obviously they wanted to record it, and what they tried to do is they wanted to juxtapose them with the dominant history that has excluded them, right? So how did the subaltern studies group start? Look at your screen. Subaltern studies began its impressive career in England at the end of the 1970s, when conversations on subaltern themes among a small group of Indian and English historians led to a proposal to launch a new journal in India. So it was a kind of, in Bengali we call it adda, or conversation on subaltern theme among a small group, and then they decided to kind of launch a new journal on subaltern theme. And then Oxford University Press in New Delhi agreed to publish their 3 volumes of essays called, and the journal was called Subaltern Studies, Writings on South Asian History and Society. So this was the name of the journal, right? Okay, so this appeared annually from 1982, and their success stimulated 3 more volumes in the next 5 years, all edited by Ranajit Guho. Today 10 and counting subaltern studies volumes have appeared. Well, Ranajit Guha is a very important name in the course of subaltern studies group. So we will know a little about him now. Okay. Ranajit Guha, this gentleman, is a historian of South Asia who was very greatly influential in the subaltern studies group, as I was saying, and was the editor of several of the group's early anthologies. Okay, he migrated from India to the UK in 1959 and was a reader in history at the University of Sussex. He currently lives in Vienna, Austria. Guha rose to the prominence at the University of Sussex and moved to the Australian National University, where he continued to work on subaltern studies. His elementary aspects of peasant insurgency in colonial India is widely considered to be a classic. So this is the gentleman, Ranajit Guho, and these are the other subalternists, the primary level subalternists who were in that group along with Ranajit Guho, that subaltern studies group. Deepesh Chakraborty, Parthu Chatterjee, David Hardiman, David Arnold, Gyanendra Pandey, and Shamim Amin. All right. So the basic question is, what was the aim of the subalternists to form a group called subalternists or start a journal named Subaltern Studies, right? So to answer that question, I have quoted Ranajit Guho from the preface of the very first volume of Subaltern Studies, right? So let's see what was their aim for such an endeavor. Okay, so I quote here Ranajit Guha. You can view it on your screen. The aim of the present collection of essays, the first of a series, is to promote a systematic and informed discussion of subaltern themes in the field of South Asian studies, and thus help to rectify the elitist bias characteristic of much research and academic work in this particular area. So their basic aim was to promote a systematic and informed discussion. That is what we do in research, right? So they were trying to promote systematic and informed discussion on subaltern themes. And their ambition was to rectify the elitist bias characteristic of this area. They believed that the Indian historiography was about bourgeois class, was elitist history. So they tried to rectify this. Okay, so this was their aim. Now, what did Guha mean by the word subaltern? We learned before about the concept of subaltern from Gramsci. Now, what did this subalternist mean by the word subaltern? I have quoted him again. Okay, the word subaltern in the title stands for the meaning as given in the concise Oxford Dictionary, that is of inferior rank. So they were giving by the literal meaning of the word, that is of inferior rank. Subaltern was basically a military word, and its meaning was of inferior rank. So they were going by this meaning. It will be used in these pages, in the pages of the journal, in these pages for general attribute of subordination in South Asian society, whether this is expressed in terms of class, caste, age, gender, and office or any other way. So they were generalizing the whole thing, the term, right? They could use it for any reason, for any person who was suppressed, right? Who was of inferior rank. Okay, so this was their usage of the term subaltern. Next, as they were having a general perspective over the term, so they were negotiating different issues through the concept of subalternity. So I have tried to view a few from their essays, like the issues of subalternity as the historical level. Examples are Guha's some aspects of historiography, Pandey's peasants' revolt and nationalism, then socio-cultural and political perspectives regarding subalternity. For example, Chatterjee's agrarian relationship and communalism in Bengal, Arnold's rebellious hillmen. So they were negotiating with different issues. Now, subsequent volumes of subaltern studies introduced some more few new young subalternists, right? So, like Swapan Dasgupta, Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, Ramachandra Guha, then Tanika Sarkar. So, all these contributors to subaltern studies highlight different issues of subalternity. They different issues of subalternity, their results, their revolts, and the acts of recovery also. Okay, so this was the subaltern studies group. And next, we will look into a very important person in this respect, and she is Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak. And she is very important for our class as we are negotiating with Mahasweta Devi. Okay, so Spivak joined the subalternist group, and as a subalternist, but she criticized the subaltern studies as itself being an elite-based school of thoughts, because they were ignorant of the issue of gendered subalternity. Now Spivak comes with the new theme of gendered subalternity, and she criticizes the subaltern studies itself as being elitist. Okay, so she revolutionized the existing course of subaltern studies through her philosophical essay. I think we have all heard about it, read about it. Can the Subaltern Speak? So here's a short bio about Spivak. Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak is an Indian scholar, literary theorist, and feminist critic. She is a university professor at Columbia University and a founding member of the establishment's Institute for Comparative Literature and Society. Her translation of Jacques Derrida's Of Grammatology brought international recognition for Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak. Spivak has become an authoritative voice of the post-colonial period. Since the publication of her essay, Can the Subaltern Speak? She has extended her discourse to a large variety of topics such as Marxism, feminism, and deconstruction. So she has extended the theme of subalternity to different aspects. Okay. Next, see, I thought that in order to understand Spivak, we should go through her words only. So Spivak says, I like the word subaltern for one reason. It is totally situational. Subaltern began as a description of a certain rank in the military, right? The literal meaning. The word was under censorship by Gramsci. He called Marxism monism and was obliged to call the proletarian subaltern. As I discussed earlier, many people believe that he was using, Gramsci was using the word subaltern as a coded word. Spivak is also saying that. That word used under duress has been transformed into the description of everything that doesn't fall under strict class analysis. So here she is somewhat talking about the subaltern studies, talking in terms of the word subaltern, and her views matches with the views of a subaltern studies group. And she is also in provision of using the word in general term. Next, see, Spivak in the new subaltern, a silent interview, she says there, politically, this new understanding of subalternity, new meaning, her understanding of subalternity, gendered subalternity, leads to global social movements supported by a Marxist analysis of exploitation, calling for an undoing of the systematic anti-systematic binary opposition in the domain of a specifically feminist politics. Such subaltern studies would require an engagement with global feminism, right? The subcontinental subaltern studies collective, of which I am a sometime member, she's talking about the subaltern studies group, does not necessarily endorse this understanding of the new subalternity, right? So she says that subaltern studies group does not endorse this idea. I am therefore taking the liberty of writing according to my own stereotype of myself here. So she tries to write as per her choice. I am therefore taking myself here rather than describing subaltern studies as it is commonly understood. So she is introducing the new thing, the gendered subalternity. Now, this essay, Can the Subaltern Speak? This is very important here, as we are about to study Draupadi and Dresskeeper, which are again translated by Spivak only. So, in Can the Subaltern Speak, the essay starts with where Spivak is discussing about an interview by Foucault and Deleuze. All right, she's where Foucault and Deleuze, they're claiming that representation is no more needed. Representation meaning the intellectuals who represent people, they are no more needed. People can now speak for themselves. These words are by Foucault and Deleuze, and Spivak is criticizing them, saying that and she chose to deconstruct this interview rather than any work by them, because in any work they would be rather conscious about what they're writing, but in an interview they are rather they slip out, right? So Spivak chose this to deconstruct this interview, and she claims that she disagrees with their views that representation is no more needed, and especially when it is connected to the third world countries, right? So Spivak starts the essay in this way in the first part. In the second part, she is giving an example of colonial India to prove a point that why representation is needed, right? So in the second part, she takes the example of the Sati woman and the codification of Hindu law in colonial India, right? So codification of Hindu law. Now, Sati women, they are the subaltern group here, and they are lost between two polarities. The British humanist discourse calling for individual freedom of Sati women, and the Hindu narrative policy calling for voluntary participation in the ritual. And the Sati women, they are lost between these two polarities, right? So the conflict between these two positions produced two different discourses with no possible solution. One postulates that white men saving brown women from brown men, that in the colonial India they are saving brown women, and the other is that the woman actually wanted to die. You are not letting them die, right? And the Sati woman comes between these two positions, and their voice is lost. No one is asking them what they want. Right. So the voice of the Hindu woman herself disappeared while these two discursive groups tried to give her a voice. Everyone is trying to, these two polarities, they both are trying to give her a voice. But she can't voice her own thing. They are trying to give her voice, but not listen to them, listen to her, the Sati woman, right? So her voice is lost. And this was the example given by Spivak to support her claim that representation is still needed. She also gives an example of Bhubneshwari Bhaduri, a relative of hers who commits suicide in 1926 Calcutta, right? So she takes this instance to say that Bhubneshwari committed suicide, which is a kind of resistance to the patriarchal society of colonial India. Now, why? Because at that time, when any teenage girl commits suicide, it is generally believed that she is trying to cover up something. She is trying to cover up a sexual affair, right? Maybe she is pregnant, and that's why to cover this up, she is committing suicide, or any failed romantic relationship, and she is committing suicide. But Bhuvaneshwari committed suicide in her menstrual cycle, meaning she left her body to prove that it is not it is not due to a failed sexual relationship. But then what was the reason? And for Spivak, this was a kind of resistance that she tried to put forward in the face of patriarchal India, proving that I am not suiciding for this thing. Now, the story was later known that she was a part of an anti-colonial movement, and they asked her to murder someone, and she could not do that, and that's why she committed suicide. But she had to commit the suicide in her menstrual period to prove that point, right? Okay. So next, Spivak speaks of epistemic violence. She criticizes Foucault. Epistemic violence meaning the knowledge violence. Spivak criticizes Foucault and Deleuze for committing epistemic violence, for projecting Eurocentric knowledge in course of by projecting Eurocentric knowledge on third world countries, right? We discussed it in earlier, right? That Foucault and Deleuze, they were saying that representation is no more needed. Now, Spivak says that knowledge is never innocent. It expresses the interest of its producer, right? Western academic thinking is produced to support their economic interest. Knowledge is never innocent, right? So thus knowledge, like any knowledge, becomes a commodity that the Eurocentric country is trying to sell to the third world countries, right? Thus knowledge, like any other commodity, is exported to the third world countries from Europe. So this was epistemic violence. But Spivak's theory of subalternity does not admit the concept that the subaltern cannot speak. Spivak has attached a special significance to the term speak. Okay, by speaking, Spivak means the transaction between a speaker and a receiver. When the subaltern tries to speak, the message that they try to communicate is lost or distorted. So it happens in a continuous process because others are not ready to listen because of the disparity of the society, right? So so the subalterns, can the subaltern speak doesn't mean that the subaltern cannot speak. The subaltern can speak, but is the society ready to listen to them? That is the question, right? Next, see, we will talk about Mahasweta Devi's Draupadi and Drashkiva here. And as I said, Spivak translated Mahasweta Devi's Draupadi, Drashkiva, and Behind the Bodies in her work Press Stories that she gave the title name of the book. Okay, so we will see a brief intro of Mahasweta Devi. Mahasweta Devi is probably the most widely translated Indian writer while working in an indigenous language today. She has taken up the case of the tribal people of India through political activism and writing. She has spent over 30 years working with and for the tribal people of West Bengal and the southeast of Bihar as a political anthropologist, investigative journalist, and editor of People's Magazine. Born in 1926 to urban middle class, professional writer Mahasweta has written 100 books to her credit, including novels, plays, and collection of stories. She has won the prestigious Gyanpith and Magase awards. In her later works, Mahasweta becomes more and more involved with the lives and struggle of the unprivileged tribal women and the atrocities inflicted upon them. And we will obviously see these instances in her works, right, in Draupadi and Drashkiva. So now the first story, Draupadi. Okay, I think it's in your syllabus, so you must have you must be you must have familiar with the storyline, but still I will go through that. Draupadi, which was published in Mahasweta Devi's work Ognikorb in 1978 and translated by Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak in her collection titled Press Stories 1997, is an extraordinary and rare document of violence and resistance by a poor, illiterate tribal woman who, in her ultimate denial to clothe herself, not only exposes the ugly and horrifying face of the political repressive forces, including government, bureaucrats, feudal masters, and the state-sponsored delinquents, but also challenges the might of callous post-colonial state embodied in the figure of Senanayak. If you have gone through the story, you know the character of Senanayak and Draupadi, but obviously we will discuss it here also. Now the story documents the economic, political, and sexual oppression of the Dalit woman, of the tribal woman, okay, in tribal areas who suffer from triple marginalization, right, in terms of caste, class, and gendered subalternity, right. So here is our Draupadi. So look, I thought the backdrop is important here to know this story, right? Excuse me. Okay, so the backdrop was important here. So the tragedy of the exploitation of the landless peasants in India, and particularly West Bengal, is an ageless one. The people near Naxalbari in Bengal are mostly tribals. The Medis, Lepchas, Bhutias, Santals, Orangs. Now the zamindars extend the petty wage of the zamindars extend the petty wage of paddy seeds, the oxen team, a handful of rice, and negligible wages to get their labor, right? In return, they reap a lion's share of the harvest at the cost of the landless labor's back breaking toil. In Great Bengal famine of 1943, starving people died in front of well-stocked food shops. A peasant differs from a landless labor in terms of ownership position since he can cultivate his own land, right? Excuse me. The migrants like Draupadi and her husband Dalla Maji are forced to work for wages that are well below the government fixation of minimum wages. Now, they are not fighting for any big academic issues. They are fighting for the bare minimum need of survival. They want to survive. Obviously, the target of these movements was the long established oppression of the landless peasantry, right, and sustained through an official government landlord coalition, right. The Indian government was able to crack down the rebellion with exceptional brutality on the Naxalites, destroying the rebellious sections of the rural population, most significantly the tribals. Obviously, this was the backdrop of the story. Now we will look into the opening lines of that story. Name Draupadi Majan, age 27. Husband Dalnamaji, deceased. Domicile Cherakhan, Bankrachar. Information whether dead or alive and or assistance in arrest 100 rupees. So this is the wanted poster of a criminal, right? What is the name of the criminal? Draupadi Majan. So the story begins with all the vital informations about the criminal Draupadi or Draupadi. Now there is a thing, her tribal name is Draupadi, but her name is also used as Draupadi. Now Devi uses the mythical characters and it's a separate kind of significance in this story, right? So what was the crime of Draupadi? Why was she on the wanted list? Okay, so now as the story progresses, we will look into the memories of Draupadi where she remembers the incident, the crime of theirs, her and her husband Dalnamaji. What was their crime? So in 1971, there was a drought in their area in Birbhum, and they had no water to drink, right? Now, a zamindar called Surja Shahu, he had a well and a tube well, but he would not let the untouchable people get water from his well. Now, what would these untouchable people do? So this was their Draupadi Majan and Dalnamaji. They joined the Naxalite movement, right? They tried to rebel. This was a kind of resistance, a rebellion to the society. And what was the reason? Bare survival. They just wanted to survive. So in course of rebellion for survival, what did they do? They killed Surja Shahu. So now they're criminals in the wanted list. Okay, so Dalnamaji, her husband, he is already deceased, and now the police is in search of Draupadi Majan. Okay, so in the course of the story, they finally catch her, right? But with her capture, the process of commodification of her body starts. Now she is no more treated as an activist with a cause, but only a body. Now she was interrogated officially, right, by the Sena Nayak. But before going to dinner, after the official interrogation, Sena Nayak issues order to his men. Senanayak issues order to his men, make her and do the needful. These were the quotes, make her and do the needful. So, in an attempt to make her, in an attempt to segregate mind, body, and soul, Draupadi is raped repeatedly by a number of men, right? She's raped repeatedly, and here I quote it from the text. Shaming her, a tear trickles out of the corner of her eye. In the muddy moonlight, she lowers her lightless eye, sees her breasts, and understands that, indeed, she is made up right. Her are bitten raw, the nipples torn. How many? 4, 5, 6, 7. Then Draupadi had passed out. This is such a brutal description of that incident, right? But But unlike passive rape victims, Devi does not let her heroine suffer in silence. With unconquerable spirit, the naked and bleeding Draupadi faces all her rapists. Right. When she is asked to produce herself in front of the Senanayak in the morning, in the next morning, right? She tears her clothes and she walks naked to the tent where Senanayak is there, to the tent, right? And here she wins. Here she is unconquerable. She cannot be defeated. They could not subjugate her mind and body and her soul. So this is the quotation from the story. Draupadi's flag. Okay, this picture I have collected it from Google, and it's a play based on that short story Draupadi. Draupadi's black body comes even closer. Draupadi shakes with an indomitable laughter that Senanayak simply cannot understand. Her ravaged lips bleed as she begins laughing. Draupadi wipes the blood on her palm and says in a voice that is terrifying, sky splitting, and sharp as her ululation. What's the use of clothes? You can strike me, but how can you clothe me again? Are you a man? Now, this is her unconquerable spirit. She is standing in front of a rapist. Now, there is no doubt that this story is a heart-hitting comment on the grim situation of the tribal people in our country in the face of democracy also. But when we come across a character like Draupadi, who decides to take her own revenge in her own way, she is an example to what extent a woman can be pushed, that it comes to her mind to raise a voice in front of a rapist. Now, conquering all her pain, she emerges as the most powerful subject here. Remember a few times before the Senanayak, when the Senanayak asks what she is doing when she comes naked, she says that this is the object of the object of your search. This body is the object of your search. But then she becomes the subject and the most powerful one, right? Now, her tale presents the bitter realities of revolutionary movements in India of the tribals, and highlights the irony that their rebellion for bare survival and how they're fighting this. Now, Dopte is representative of millions of tribal women who are oppressed, who are marginalized, and who are victimized by the agents of politics, right? But our heroine, she doesn't become victimized. She wins at the end, right? Now we will look into the next story, that is Rescuer. Again, I have given a long introduction, I guess. Okay. In the breast giver or Stanadayani, the Bengali name, motherhood takes on a total different dimension. The professional mother, right? The professional mother, whose only means of survival lies in her ability to produce children and be in a process of continuous lactation. I hope you have already read the story, Breast Giver. It was in your syllabus. So you must know that Yashoda becomes the professional mother and the wet nurse. The story builds itself on the cruel ironies of caste, class, and patriarchy again. The protagonist Yashoda, a poor Brahmin woman. The other one was about the tribal people, and this one is about a Brahmin woman. Became a professional wet nurse to support her family. Yashoda's husband met with an accident and got crippled. She started breastfeeding the whole Haldar's family's grandchildren in order to earn money, right? She had to breed annually to make breast yield so that she could earn more money to make both ends meet. This means that she had to suffer endlessly. In fact, motherhood and mothering, right? Motherhood meaning when you are having your children, and mothering meaning that the profession she starts, professional mother, mothering, here merge into one another. It is only through the biological action of motherhood, meaning she has to be pregnant every year, so that to indulge in mothering, so that she could breastfeed the grandchildren of other family. Motherhood here includes in its purview all the children, right? The own and the fostered that have suckled at her breast, right? Now Yashoda works for the Haldar family unit, and this is noteworthy uh, that she is a Brahmin woman, right? Now systematized caste structures in our society is kind of implies that the Brahmins are in the top, right? And from the social structure, Haldar family are less privileged in terms of caste, but they are more privileged in terms of money. Now, keeping a Brahmin woman, Yashoda, it's prestigious for them, right? And they keep Yashoda as a wet nurse only because she is a Brahmin woman. She is of higher caste, right? Now, see, Catrice feedback in her foreword in Rescuers, she says, the milk that is produced in one's own body for one's own children is a use value. She is applying Marxist terms here. When there is superfluity of use values, exchange values arise. Use value was when Yashoda was using her breast milk for her own children. Exchange values when she gets money, she gets paid from the Haldar family and she is giving her breast milk to the children of Haldar family. That which cannot be used is exchanged. So as soon as exchange value of Yashoda's milk emerges, it is appropriated. Good food and constant sexual services are provided, right? She is provided with everything so that she can be kept in prime condition for optimum lactation, right? Lactation. Now, the milk she produces for her children is presumably through necessary labor. Necessary labor is that it's kind of like the labor labor that the worker has to produce by means of livelihood to have his or her livelihood. The milk that she produces for the children of her master's family is through the surplus labor. Now, what is surplus labor? Surplus labor is a concept, I told you it's Marxist concept, the whole thing. Is in its critical political economy, it means labor performed in excess labor to produce the means of livelihood of a worker, right? It's the excess labor, not the necessary labor. Now, she is having excess labor, right? Indeed, this is how the origin of this transition is described in the story. Excess labor and the necessary labor. She is having excess labor to feed the children of Hardar's family, right? Now see, this is again a play, a kind of a ode to the breastfeeder, and I collected it from an article by Indian Express. Okay. Now, motherhood was always her way of living and keeping alive her world of countless beings. Yashoda was a mother by profession, professional mother. Yashoda was not an amateur mama like the daughters of and wives of the master's house. The world belongs to the professionals. Now, we already discussed this that Yashoda was performing as a professional mother, right? To keep her both ends meet, to feed her own children and husband and crippled husband. So she takes up the job of the professional mother. Next, see, in Trashgiver, Mahasweta Devi's omniscient narrative technique incorporates ironical remarks about Indian womanhood. We will discuss Indian womanhood here. She watches that Yashoda is the typical Indian woman whose unchallenged commitment to her husband and others makes no sense and reason. That's how Indian women are subjected, are portrayed, right? And here the author extends the mythical characters, describes the mythical characters starting from Sati, Savitri, and Sita, She compares the Indian womanhood, that how people want to see the Indian woman as Sati Savitri and Sita, or like the woman's role in Indian films like Nirupa Roy, right? The mother figure of India. So, uh, so her affection for her children and her unnatural ability to make sacrifices. Women are expected to sacrifice, right? Without saying a word. Now, the irony turns out to be further disenthralled as Mahasweta Devi expounds that seeing such women one and all comprehend that in India, the tradition still streams. Thus, keeping such women in mind, such moral maxims have been composed. These are the quotations from the text. A female's life hangs on like a turtle's. Her heart breaks, but no word is uttered. So she has to suffer in silence. If she suffers, she cannot say it, right? The woman will burn, her ashes will fly. Only then will we sing her praise on high. So we will praise a woman when she dies, right? After so many sacrifices, after keeping things to herself only, after all this, she will suffer and in silence, and we will praise her only after death. So this is a kind of woman, the example of womanhood that is given in this work. Next, the divinity. Yashoda is divine since she is faithful, unwavering wife who utilizes her unique position in the public eye to create a new life. Now, the name Yashoda, it obviously we first think about the mythical figure, the foster mother of Krishna, right? The milk mother of Lord Krishna, who raises him and rears him like her own particular child. Now, Yashoda is trying to keep up to that level. In public, she is trying to create the life as if she is divine, as she, and not only she, but the people around her also. Now, see, Mahasweta's Yashoda is introduced upon this character, like the foster mother, but with additional dimension of economic aspects with regards to the circumstances. She is not taken up this. She is not taking up this job like Yashoda to have a child, foster child, but she is taking it as a professional, as a profession, right? Professional mother. And her breast can't yield milk unless she continues reproducing annually. In order to breastfeed the children of the Haldar family, she has to she has to reproduce annually herself also, right? Now, her husband, being illuminated by the spirit of Brahma, the creator, explains, these are the lines from the text. Now you will have to think of that and suffer. You are a faithful wife, a goddess. You will yourself be pregnant, be filled with a child, rear it at your breast. Isn't this why mother came to you as a midwife? Now, everyone is trying to give some divine status to Yashoda, right? Next scene. But at the end, Yashoda dies alone in a hospital for breast cancer. She has reared her own 20 children and 30 children from the Haldar family. But no one is present at the time of her death. She is dying alone instead of all these things happening, right? So the quotations are from the last phase of the text. If you suckle your mother, all lies. Nepal and Gopal, they are her own children. Don't look at me. And the master's boys don't spare to pick to ask how I am doing. So no one is asking her how she is doing, right, at the end of the story. Yashoda was God manifest. Others do and did whatever she thought. Yashoda's death was also the death of God. When a mortal masquerades as God here below, she is forsaken by all and she must always die alone. So she is to die alone instead of all these things, right? Instead of having 30 children, 20 of her own and 30 foster child. Next, see, uh, to conclude this, these two female protagonists, Yashoda and Draupadi of Mahasweta Devi, are casualties of the socio-economic, socio-political, economical, and patriarchal framework. In engraving women's resistance in what one could call a female non-verbal communication, Mahasweta Devi arranges these stories in a continuum with a other work which calls upon the protagonist to question stereotypes. They're questioning the stereotypes. The breast views as basically female and therefore parts of the discourse of oppression. Here, the breast are utilized by Mahasweta Devi to challenge this very operation. Her stories bring to the surface not just the wretchedness of the totally disregarded tribal individuals, additionally verbalize the oppression of women in the society, right? In Devi's short stories, women are about to dismiss the social confinements, advance by wiping out the apparent liabilities of being a woman. These protagonists from the short stories make a type of resistance, right? They're resisting. That is subversion of opposite sex and sexual attribution. Now, Spivak out in her introduction in Breast Stories, she says that breast is far more than a symbol in the stories, right? It becomes a means of harsh comment on an unfair system. uh, in case of Draupadi, transformed into a commodity, the breast as a commodity. And it is a metaphoric part object standing for the other in the and the subaltern woman in case of breast, right? So breast becomes a very important symbol here, and thus ends the stories talking about the resistance the the two stories. They show the socio-political and economical and patriarchal
എന്റെ വീഡിയോ ഓഫാ ഓരോ കൃതികൾ എന്നാ കാണിക്കുന്നത്
the patriarchal framework of the society. And well, this is how the class ends now. Thank you so much for your patience and for listening to me. Thank you so much. And this has been really great. Now, if you have any questions regarding anything, you can ask me.
Yeah, Jemima. It was a good session and a good beginning, I must say.
Thank you so much.
And then you can just see on the chat box, there are some questions over there. Please try to answer them.
Chat box.
You stop that sharing of your screen.
Okay.
So let me read out.
That would be really great.
What are the limitations of subaltern studies? How can subaltern studies be studied when we are speaking for them?
What are the limitations of subaltern studies? How can subaltern studies be studied when we are speaking for them? Right. When we discussed the Spivak area, I already said that Spivak also criticized this, right? That subaltern studies basically is kind of an elitist, started as an elitist thought of school, right? So yes, we are speaking for them. Representation is needed. You have to understand that without representation, if we leave everything to the people to speak for themselves, that won't be okay in our third world countries. The representation has to be there. So it's not like that we are speaking for the subalterns, but we are being it's kind of a relay. The intellectuals, they are getting the message from the subaltern and they are passing it to the world, right? So they're kind of they're in the communication, right? So it's not like that the subaltern is there speaking for the subaltern, but rather they are taking up the issues. And obviously there are limitations in subaltern studies. It as Spivak also said, it itself is kind of elitist, it has elitist bias in itself. So obviously there are limitations. Studied, what am I speaking for them? Just epistemic, epistemologically violence, like while analyzing, I take from them.
I hope we are getting late for the. We can have this question session later. So those who have any doubts or clarifications,
you can obviously reach to me via my mail. You can post the questions there, and I would try to give the answers, obviously by studying a lot, right? So thank you so much. It has been great, and thanks to you again, Dr. Faz Ahmed Ilkal. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you, madam.
thank you one and all. Yeah, see you. Bye bye.
Thank you very much, madam. Sir.
Thank you. Thank you.